What is up? You are catching another 5 a.m. Alien Scientists live stream. Up again before work, ready to start my day, and up at the crack of dawn, starting thinking about UFOs and all this crazy research that I've done over the past 15 years. And who the hell could sleep when you have such exciting stuff going on? Now, I want to talk a bit about some of the research that we got and things we got going on. First off, the elections here, and the election's a real serious time of the year. Dave T 231, howdy, you are first in the live chat. What is up, my man? So for election night is Tuesday. I guess is it Tuesday, election day? I guess I'm going to be going down to the studio with Tim Pool. My buddy Ian Crossland is good friends with Tim Pool. Been on his podcast a number of times. People want to check out Tim Pool and Timcast, and make sure you subscribe to his channels on YouTube here. I'm going to be hanging out with him. I've never met Tim before. I've been down to their offices and hung out with Ian and some of those other guys at the studio before, but I never actually met Tim. Looking forward to that. Tim's really cool. He's got a really huge, real popular podcast. I think he's been on Rogan before, and he's interested in learning more about disclosure. And I can't wait to talk to him and tell him what I think about that subject. So, let's get into that subject, shall we? Got a lot of interesting stuff coming up too. We're going to be doing a recap on Edgar Fouché, Area 51 employee. He's a sergeant, master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, and he worked on flight test controls for the F-15 and other aircraft at Area 51. Had access to some interesting things, and made a disclosure in 1998 at IUFOC. Went back the following year in 1999, gave a second presentation, and then kind of disappeared off the radar for a number of years until I started digging up his research and doing more stuff on it, and this rotating mercury plasma idea for how to do anti-gravity, and some of my research into kinematic effects, all the old school stuff with Otis Carr, and also the Henry William Wallace patents, if people want to look up some of that stuff for reference on that technology and some of the research into that, and connecting with also Bryce Dewitt's papers on gravitomagnetic effects of rotating bodies, including rotating superconductors, which has been an interesting and recurring theme in a lot of the anti-gravity effects, anomalous research effects that, we call it anti-gravity. It's just anomalous forces that occur in these experiments that have been tried to use for gravitational purposes and whatnot. So anyways, we had a falling out with Ed, and some things happened between me and him, and I kind of went on this debunking route where I tried to debunk the crap out of Ed for a number of years, and have never really successfully and satisfactorily done that. So we're going to revisit the Ed Fouché case in a couple weeks here. I'm thinking November 15th on the morning. In the morning, November 15th. I think that would be a good day. Sunday morning, early morning. I'm going to see if I'm trying to get Dan Benkert and also David Hilton to come along for this as well, because they both were researchers on my forum who knew and talked to Ed personally, got to kind of cross-interview him in depth over a number of years, and we really pulled apart his story over a number of years. And so these, between me, David, and Dan, I think those three people will probably be the foremost experts I can think of on the Ed Fouché case. So I'm going to bring all three of those guys on, and we're going to have live chat for lots of questions and questioning and stuff. So hopefully we can get some good questions in the chat, and some people can have some time, a couple weeks, 2 weeks to prepare and spread the news about this, so that we can get some, we can really hash this case out, and because I want to get as many debunkers on trying to throw stuff at this as possible. We're just going to try and see what sticks to the wall after this is all done. We're going to just go through the whole load of it, all of it, from the start to finish. And that's coming up. That'll be interesting. Look forward to that on November 15th. And also catch me talking about disclosure, maybe on Timcast or Tim Pool's channel. So subscribe to his channel so you can catch me if I end up being on there next Tuesday when I go down and talk to him about some of this research that I've done and stuff. So anyways, let's talk about some of this stuff. Yeah, I don't know if I want to get into that just yet. All right, maybe we will. We'll just touch on it real quick. About the time travel stuff. So Jack Sarfati has made some interesting comments recently. He went on a show, and it was on Venmo, a video on Venmo that he had he posted about it on Facebook, on the American Anti-Gravity group on Facebook, and I went and checked out this video. And in the video, he'd claimed that the Tic Tac craft time travels because he's basing his assumptions on the radar data, because he had the radar data from the Tic Tac, and it shows that it moves around and from place to place. And he says the only way you can explain that is that it time traveled to do that. And I don't think that's quite entirely true, because one of the things Ed Fouché talked about in 1998 at that presentation, if you can search for it if you go back to the presentation, is something called electronic countermeasures. He talked about electronic countermeasures and then electronic countermeasures. So there's both, so ECMs and ECCMs, which were a technology that was developed out at Area 51 at the time. One of these technologies is something called jamming or radar insertion, or linear chirping, frequency hopping, and there's quite a few technologies involved in this radar signature intelligence, and that people need to be aware of, and that Jack kind of did not mention in his analysis and with his very simple conclusion that the Tic Tac had to have time traveled in order to explain the radar data. That's not true. ECCMs can easily explain that radar data without time travel. So it's interesting. It's just something I wanted to point out that wasn't mentioned, and that people need to look into and look at. Ed talked about that again. I learned about a lot of that stuff from Ed, and then later T.D. Barnes was asked on what is it? The Truth. I forget the name of the. I have to find. Yeah, T.D. Barnes weighs in. So they had him weigh in on the Navy and UFO encounters, and they asked him about it. Here's the article, and I'll post this. So T.D. Barnes, in case you don't know, he was like the head security guy out at Area 51 for a number of years, and he was asked, like, basically, hey, what do you think about that Nimitz thing? And he said the same exact thing that I had said. Although he was asked before, I have videos of me saying this before they asked T.D. Barnes this, because I was saying it was ECCMs, because I knew that from Ed Fouché. I'm like, oh, Project Palladium, Project Nemesis. They have both of these CIA projects have this technology. Yet Palladium, there's Palladium and Nemesis. So I was mentioning a lot of these technologies and a lot of these things before. And then T.D. Barnes came out and said, yeah, that's what he thought it was, which was kind of like confirmation for me in a lot of ways, that I'm like, all right, this has to be some sort of advanced other types of technology. Now, another thing I want to talk about is that gimbal shape, right? I gotta find the video now of the Project Skyvault. Oh, what the fuck? It's not loading this. Mike, how come I'm typing in here? It's not doing nothing. Microwave propulsion. Microwave plasma propulsion. I think it is. Where's the video? It's got to be the right one. Shit, I have it on my website. If you go to Project Skyvault on my website, under the anti-gravity tab. And by the way, my website's going to get a rehaul pretty soon. It's gonna this site's gonna disappear, and we're gonna have a WordPress site up with a lot more interactive and searchable stuff on there. So where's the freaking video? There's a video of this Project Skyvault thing, and I wanted to show people it. I think I had it in this video. I showed the thing about it. I don't know where that is now.
Also need to be extremely lightweight.
So I gotta find this video, and it disappears because like good things tend to. I have a video. I have a copy of it on my. I probably actually have a copy of it, but it's a craft that looks just like the gimbal UFO. It's the same shape, same like everything, but they're flying it with microwave propulsion using this Project Skyvault stuff. I think it was at New Mexico Tech. I'm not sure, but they have like a lab and where they did all the Project Skyvault research on microwave plasma propulsion. But it looks very similar to like this balloon effect. So they can get this balloon or this object in the sky, and they shoot microwaves at it, and they can get it. They can control it with the microwaves. Okay, and here's the patent for it. So here's an article, another article on it by Brett Tingley of thedrive.com, and this can explain the movement and flight characteristics of the Tic Tac without warp drive and without time travel and without portals and without any of that crazy kind of stuff that Jack Sarfati and some of these other guys are attempting to use to explain. So anyways, I just want to point these things out because I have other technologies. These guys haven't talked about these. They haven't commented on it. They just made these claims that they, right at the beginning of the video, Jack Sarfati says that, oh, it had to have time traveled in order to, to explain this. And that's not true. It's just not true. We have radar insertion that can explain that without time travel. Please comment. Like, please tell me, show me how I'm wrong. Anyways, this is my whole thing. This is the patent. I sent the patent on there. The patent on here. It's patent number US 2019. It's 003086A1 from January 3rd, 2019, and it's called Directed Energy Deposition to Facilitate High-Speed Applications. Yeah, so they direct energy at one side of the craft, and the directed energy creates this. It basically cooks, the microwaves cook the air on that side of the craft, and that cavitates, it causes supercavitation of the air, which lowers the speed of light and the speed of sound in that region, so they can have no sonic booms. The other thing that he mentioned was there was the lack of a sonic boom. This can explain the lack of a sonic boom, how it can reach, how it can accelerate and reach those speeds with no sonic boom, because it's actually changing the air pressure. It's changing the speed of sound locally around the craft in order to supercavitate. And it's right here in the patent. It talks about a bullet penetrating water. And this is similar to how air works, and with air resistance, the bullet penetrates and it creates this effect as the bullet physically displaces water around it as it moves through the water. In this supercavitation, they microwave all the air in a straight line in front of like where they're going, so the air literally moves out of the way and creates like a hollow tube, so they can have laminar flow of the air around the craft, so the craft can literally just shoot through the air without the same problems. So very interesting technology. Here are the patents. And it can certainly explain why this Tic Tac craft can accelerate without reaching a sonic boom. So there you go. We have some, real science to work with here, rather than, a bunch of gobbledygook theory and stuff that, looks nice on the whiteboard. I like engineerable stuff. That's why we're working with Falcon Space and the ARPE team on our lab in Hawthorne, New Jersey, at Falcon Hybrid, where we're trying to demonstrate a lot of these technologies and build these things. So, making good progress on that front, guys. Lots of interesting stuff. I can't wait to have Jeremiah on to show all the things that he's been building and all the inventions that, you know, that he's been coming up with, and all we got a Project Skyvault mock-up now. We're doing plasma microwaves. We're doing gigahertz frequencies. We're doing Alzafon. We had David Alzafon on the show. We're still talking with him and trying to get as much front on the Alzafon experiment as we can. This is all the Space Force technology, guys. This is like why we have a Space Force. This is why Trump created a Space Force. It's coming out. All right, the truth is coming out, and it doesn't go there because I want to go back because we're not going to take this TTSA bullshit about the Adams Project and how they had that parts of Art's parts that Art had, and how they give it to the U.S. Army. They gave it back to the Army or whatever, and they had that whole CRADA going on, and it just basically disappeared back in. They waved this technology stuff in front of our face, and then it disappeared back into a black hole with all these other dead ends and all this nonsense. It was basically just like a red herring that was taken out of this false rabbit hole, waved around in front of the whole UFO audience and mainstream audience, like smell the bait, and then that red herring disappeared away into another rabbit hole, and everyone chased it there and don't know where to go. They're like, where is it? I smelled it. There was something around here, but where did it go? So this is I want to bring some shit out right now. I found this guy. I wish I had found him. He published a lot of this stuff. He started publishing this back in 2009. Okay, this was published in May 2009. Unbelievably. I would have killed to have had this research 10 years ago, these pieces of the puzzle. And I want to talk about that for a minute because it's kind of important. The day after Roswell, right? My whole introduction to this kind of thing was reading Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. And that was when I was like 20-year-old college student, just second year of physics maybe. And this book put a bad sour taste in my mouth as a scientist. If I wasn't a scientist and I didn't have like such an academic background at that time, I probably would have gotten into a lot of this stuff a little bit more because I wouldn't have understood it. But it's because the way it was written and the way it was presented, it's so important that, when you come out with this stuff, it has to be treated with the utmost care, because you say something wrong and it's really easy to turn scientists and people off in this field, like academics off. This field is just like oil to water. It's really easy to lose people. Although at the same time, we have a lot of those people that this stuff's ridiculous, yet they're here in the chat watching my friggin' channel. You know what I mean? They don't comment, but they're watching. They're sitting out there. So it's funny. But it's a careful line to draw because you want to treat this absolutely most carefully because you don't want to turn people off and put a bad taste in their mouth. Look at I would have probably found this information probably 10 years ago if this book hadn't turned me off and put such a bad taste in my mouth with his treatment of the science and the things he said about nitinol wire and the metallurgy and stuff. So it's not until recently, probably like the last 2 months, that I've started really reading through all this stuff. The General Shulgin's 1947 memo, all this stuff on John Elroy John Center, who was a Battelle scientist and metallurgist. He stated that he had analyzed metal from a crashed UFO when he was employed by Battelle Memorial Institute. He was a senior research chemist who worked for Battelle for nearly 2 decades, from 1939 to 1957. And he authored several scientific papers during his employment while at Battelle. So very interesting. I've talked about this Battelle connection and everything before. Obviously, a lot of UFO researchers and stuff know that the Roswell debris that was removed from Roswell, and it wasn't just a small amount of debris that was hidden under a bush or carried back in a Jeep, as you'll read in some of these stories that don't do very good research. It was a lot of debris, and it was over several square miles of area out in the middle of nowhere in this desert that they found it, and they had to gather it up. So very interesting stuff, but it was flown actually on transport to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. And there it sat at the U.S. Army Material Command. The Air Force wasn't actually, the Air Force didn't actually exist in 1947 during pre-Roswell incident. The Air Force was actually created a couple months after Roswell. And a lot of UFO historians believe that the U.S. Air Force was kind of like the government. The creation of the Space Force now is for this new technologies and this new area of development to keep it sort of technologically compartmentalized and separate from the other stuff for security purposes and intelligence purposes. The same thing was done with the creation of the U.S. Air Force back in the late 1947, right after Roswell. And a lot of Air Force historians think that the Air Force was created in response to Roswell. Very interesting stuff, because in 1947 lots of things happened. We had the National Security Act, which created the NSA and the CIA. So it created the CIA, which used to be the Army's OSS, or Office of Strategic Services, which people can look up. Some of that stuff, very cool. So it was brought to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and from there it probably would have gone to a couple classified military contractors who were experts in metallurgy and the materials science to look at these materials that they had gotten from this crashed UFO. And so it only would make sense that it didn't have to go far from Dayton, Ohio, at Wright-Patterson, to Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio, which is about 75 miles east of Wright-Patterson. And at Battelle Memorial Institute, very, very interesting company. The more I'm learning about Battelle, just realizing that this is the central key to the UFO puzzle. It exists at this company, and the more we're learning about it and finding, the more we're coming to that conclusion. So Battelle is a private, non-profit. It's a non-profit organization for charitable, scientific, and educational purposes. But it doesn't educate the public. It only educates the military and industrial complex. It's very interesting. A lot of the research that's done at Battelle is classified. But what gets more interesting is the research that was done in 1947 around nitinol wire, and tracing back the history of the metallurgy of the development of nitinol. Because I didn't get that part from Philip Corso's book. He didn't do a very good job at elucidating the metallurgy and the real science of this, and not nearly as good a job as Anthony Bragalia, this new researcher of UFOexplorations.com. This guy's done far better research on piecing this together, and so surely these scientists and these reports should exist. There should have been, these scientists were, say that their daughter came out years later. They didn't approach anyone. They were approached later by researchers digging this case up. And then when they approached this guy's daughter, she went and told the story. She said, yes, my dad did say one time that, he was given alien debris from Roswell, from a UFO. They didn't say it was Roswell, but they said from a UFO, and that he had to analyze it as part of this study. So this came out of researchers digging into this and going to the scientists at Battelle and their families and trying to piece together some of the history of this. So very interesting it's like, not like the skeptics can say that, oh, well, Jesse Marcel changed his story to say that it wasn't a weather balloon, it was something else, when he realized there was a book deal. No, that's not what happened, bro. So this is going to be very damning and damaging to people like Cal Korff, who want us to believe that Roswell was nothing but Project Mogul. So the Battelle Memory Medal report that we found, okay, they did a second medal report. It's called the Second Progress Report on Contract AF33 038-3736, and it was completed for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1949. The authors were C.M. Craighead, F. Fawn, and L.W. Eastwood. It appears to be part of a series of such contracts conducted throughout the early 1950s. So the scientists who authored this report were closely associated with Battelle's chief titanium metallurgist and later Battelle's UFO researcher for Project Blue Book. So Jack Vallée, during his research into Project Blue Book, had said he discovered that there were actually two Project Blue Books that ran kind of simultaneously to each other. There was the one Project Blue Book that the U.S. Air Force did publicly, kind of, that was acknowledged, and there was another secret Project Blue Book that was done by this other study group headed by this guy, Dr. Howard Cross of Battelle. So Battelle ran the second Project Blue Book, which was the study into the Roswell material, the real stuff, the stuff that wasn't given to the public because of security purposes. Very interesting. So the fact that there's a second progress report on this contract, and that second progress report contains the first phase diagrams for nickel and titanium alloys and the metallurgy that would have been required for creating nitinol wire. So nitinol wire kind of came from studying this. Apparently, they had this progress report on this contract to study this material, and they figured out it's nickel and titanium. So they created, we need super high pure titanium, and they made a phase diagram, and they played around with this metal, and they looked for that exact ratio. But he's talking about the way that they discovered it. A nitinol wire wouldn't have been like just. He said I got to get a metallurgist on here to really confirm this and get into detail on the metallurgy and on this for us. Because he claims he has some people that have said this. I said, would they be willing to go on record? Because I've actually talked to Anthony. I wrote him a couple of emails, and he's gotten back to me. He's interested in actually doing I want to get a film producer and do a documentary on this. I think this is amazing material. This is just mind-blowing. So no references have ever been found, and no hard copies have ever been found of the first progress report, which obviously if the second report exists, there has to be a first report, right? Logically, right? So where's the first report? Battelle's head librarian and historian couldn't find it. Went through all their records. They could not find a copy of this first progress report on this study. Very interesting. So if they created nitinol wire in the second report, supposedly this is the first, but this is the first reference, the earliest reference that anyone can find at Battelle's metallurgy stuff to the nitinol, tracing back the history of the development of the nitinol wire, right? It came from this second progress report. So there has to be a first progress report, but the first progress report's missing. So what I think it was is they had this memory foil, the same memory foil that Jesse Marcel and so many others, witnesses from Roswell, reported seeing, touching, playing with, trying to cut, trying to burn, the fire department there. High resistance to temperature, but also the shape retention alloys, the memory metals, shape recovery metals. Very interesting stuff. So that material was sent to Wright-Patterson. Parts of it were sent to Battelle. Their metallurgists studied it. They said, oh, it's some kind of nickel titanium alloy, right? It's some kind of combination of nickel and titanium that creates this. So then they create this phase diagram. They kind of back engineer it, and then they say, oh, we just, we figured this out, just out through our metallurgy studies. And that's kind of like how some of the technology got out. But then I think they must have put the kibosh on this, or had it somewhere else, because who else has worked on this since 1947, or actually had access to this material to really do anything with it? And that's what I'd really like to know. Like, there's got to be more stories from more scientists, especially people, probably Battelle. If Battelle's so closely involved in this already with what we've already dug up here, they have to have been involved in subsequent and future research, and might even be conducting ongoing current research. This material is still stored somewhere. It's still in some kind of hangar or archive somewhere at this company. And it's been kept from the American people because it's in a private institute, untouchable by FOIA. And this same private institution also manages Brookhaven National Lab, Idaho National Labs, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, Los Alamos National Laboratory, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. So all of our main national labs and government labs, which could possibly make these discoveries, are basically run and owned by these people. So the metallic glass stuff is another interesting, the bulk metallic glasses are another interesting material, which displays some of these properties of amorphous metals. Okay, so they're called amorphous metals, and they display really high elastic limits and also strength. They're like one of the highest. Like polymers have really high elasticity, but they don't have a lot of strength. Like elastic band, you can stretch it really, but it doesn't really hold a lot of weight. It just breaks. Well, these amorphous metals are like super materials, and I'm not saying that amorphous metal or that metallic glass that I have is itself. I don't know where the metallic glass went. I don't find that. It's got to be in the back here. Anyways, I'm not saying that metallic glass was the actual same thing, but certainly titanium alloys do produce bulk metallic glasses, and some of the strongest bulk metallic glasses are actually titanium alloy glasses. So is it possible that Roswell memory foil was an amorphous metal? Yeah, it is possible. Do I know all of the, do we know everything about that material? No, we don't. It might have other characteristics that are more subatomic, like subatomic machinery built in. Like we don't know the complexity of the material quite, fully, because we haven't studied it. We don't have access to that first progress report, or any subsequent progress reports, on that contract, or maybe a different contract if it was changed, But it's still interesting, still very, very much worth doing more investigation and digging into. And I believe it exists out at Battelle in Ohio. I believe there's got to be this thing's got to be stored somewhere in a basement archive and locked away in some, and it belongs to the American people. It belongs out in the public, dude. We need to know about this. This is just the worst crime against humanity I can possibly think of. We've been held back. Not only have they done this, but they also sabotaged all the research that could lead us to this, I believe. Because I know numerous people who are working on stuff at these labs, and they got their funding cut and their research redirected by these managers, these lab managers. So this is very serious stuff, man. This is like, yeah, COVID is a pretty big crime against humanity too. You're right. COVID definitely is a crime. I mean, the reaction to the lockdowns, and everything else that's going on with COVID is definitely a transparent New World Order um, takeover. It's draconian in this legislation. Don't even want to get into that because it's just like it's all these virtue signaling people that think they're like doing something positive and helping humanity, you know. But honestly, the way I look at it is their evils in this world far greater than death. And I got that from the "Live Free or Die" quote. The coolest, most awesome, most funnest state motto of them all. And the phrase was adopted from a toast written by General John Stark, who served as an officer in the British Army during the French and Indian War, and as a major general in the Continental Army during the American Revolution. He was the hero of Bennington. He sent his toast by letter. He said, "Live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils." Right. It's not. And if you're not going, well, people should live free or die, you know? And if police come and knock down your door to break up your Christmas dinner, you should probably just shoot it out with them because it's not worth living in a world that's freaking has tyranny in it and Nazi stormtroopers. Fucking ridiculous, man. Anyways, I don't want to get angry and get pissed off at all the stupid stuff going on in the world right now with COVID and the election. It's all because of the election that this is going on. You wouldn't even hear about it on the news if it, you know, the news wouldn't even, it would be like swine flu. They wouldn't even have reported on it and people wouldn't even know about it. It's just that the media makes such a big deal out about things that it makes people go crazy. It just shows the amount of control that the media has over people. Like, say there's a New Mexico article on Roswell, right, by this news station. So I was reading a bunch of stuff on Roswell, what really happened at Roswell or something. There was some, I forget the article. There's a bunch of, yeah, you read all these all these official freaking reports like Britannica or Smithsonian Magazine, you know, 1947, a high altitude balloon crash landed in Roswell. You know, you read all these reports of it. That is like the reason, you know, it's just fake news. It's fake news. It's fake reporting. It's fake news, and it's brainwashing all these people into being like, well, I know facts about the case. I read this article. And yeah, let's have a talk about that, you know? And then, no, brother. No, brother, we got the friggin' scientists now. We got the names of the reports. So, an interview conducted in the 1990s, former Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Brigadier General Arthur Exon confirmed the existence of the Roswell medal reports. Exon, the base commander of Wright-Patterson in the 60s, related that he was privy to some of the details on the composition of the crash debris and a variety of tests that were performed on it. Astonishingly, Exxon states of the debris that it was titanium and some other metal they knew about, and the processing was somehow different. Of course, special processing of titanium and the other metal that they knew about, nickel, is required to create nitinol. Exxon added tellingly, and it wouldn't surprise me if the material wasn't still around. Certainly the reports are. Exxon was likely referring to the Battelle progress reports on memory metal done for Wright-Patterson in the late 1940s. Air Force General George Shulgin, who led intelligence at the Pentagon at the time of the Roswell incident, authored a previously remarked secret draft memo on the flying saucer issued October 30th, 1947, about 4 months after the crash. That's the Shulgin memo. Let's take a look at that. It's required to collect memorandums similar to the attached draft. The issue is located. It will be appreciated. The memorandums produced by the Secretary of the Air Force. Intelligence requirement. Flying saucer type aircraft. Intelligence requirements on flying saucer type aircraft. So there you go. What Russian factories are building the Horton 8? Is it Horton Brothers? Interesting stuff here, man. You know, so they were had rumors at the time, and they were trying to figure out who the heck's. Yeah, they're trying to figure out who the heck's craft this was, who built it, where it came from. Very interesting stuff. Patel scientist confesses. That was John Elroy Center, or Elroy John Center. Yeah, very interesting. The interview. He said he's done all these interviews with these these people. The thing is that these people were all in their 20s or 30s back in ¡47, which means they would have been in their 90s, during the 1990s or 2000s. 80. They would have been all. They would have been 80 in their 80s in the 1990s. So most of them started like dying off, actually, in the 90s. Most of these people died off in the past couple of years. So like a lot of these people aren't even around anymore, which is interesting. A lot of these secrets are probably taken to the grave, but there's probably still people out there who know or talk. But there's got to be someone who can get access to this. There's someone who has the key, who can get this out there. These progress reports are very interesting, and I'm trying to get a copy of them from him. So I've got one of these interesting progress reports here. This is a different one that I can find, one of these technical reports, just to get an example of what they look like. But very interesting, man. There's got to be these let's get these reports declassified. Let's get them published out there. Start searching for them, people. I'm telling you, everywhere you need to look. We want disclosure. This is how we get it. You don't get it by sitting back and watching TTSA and buying Tom DeLonge t-shirts. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen that way. You want real disclosure, this is what we do here. Thank you. That's what's up. All right, let's read some comments, man. Shh. Anyone who has a question or something, scream it loud in all caps. What the heck is I got this new mouse, and it just likes to. No. Ultrasonics with mass. Yeah, the metamaterials, man. Our science lab is. Oh, dude, Jeremiah, I'm gonna put Skype on if you want to call in and give us a lab update and tell us what's good with the lab, man. I'm on Skype if you want to call in right now. I'd love to get an update on the lab. Dude, there was a cover-up. Absolutely, we all know about the cover-up. Then we don't know enough. We're really, really digging in now and getting to the bottom of this UFO puzzle. You know what I'm saying? UFOs are real. Flying saucers are real. They are real physical craft. They're not interdimensional or illusions or projections. And we're going to figure out how to build one. I can't wait to get Jeremiah. You got to get all your videos ready too, so we can start putting some. I want to start showing all the videos of like what's going on in the lab. Lots of cool stuff, man. Absolutely real. Yeah. Subatomic machinery, publicly known. I don't know those. I mean, if you could, can you consider metallic glasses machinery? Not really. I don't know any there's no subatomic machinery. It would have to be molecular machinery. It would have to be on the molecular level, right? You can't have subatomic machinery, really. The only real thing like subatomic machinery is just using like nuclear spin states and coherent states for like quantum computing, But that's not really a machine, like the same thing as a machine, So there's molecular machines, right? Like the tail thing, and the tail motor, and these flagellums, right? That was one of the interesting molecular machines, very simplified. Molecular machine. It has bearings, everything. Pretty cool shit, right? Yeah, all these molecular machines. Remember these from back in the day, dude. This was super cool. Yeah, there we go. That's your friggin' molecular differential. Programmed materials. Well, the memory shape recovery alloys aren't really programmed materials. You know what's cool though is 5D crystals. 5D crystals and super memory that can store data virtually forever. The Superman memory crystals, man. 5-dimensional crystals that they can write to with lasers. Grow avocado. There we go. Yeah.
Yo, what's up, man? There we go. All right, piped in, live audio. So, what's been going on out there?
Yeah, you are coming through on desktop audio.
All right. You want to get me piped through in direct?
Yep, you're live.
Very awesome. Dude, your new setup is wicked. That is definitely what's up.
Oh yes, dude. I got a nice new computer set up. My whole background. Oh, I got the 3D printer now too.
Yeah, buddy. I cannot believe I don't have a 3D printer yet. I am desperately in need of one. Somebody want to donate a 3D printer? I could really use one here in Wisconsin.
I got a TV donated, man. I got yeah, right. I should buy a new one and send you this one.
I'll tell you what, man, having any 3D printer would make a world of difference. You would be astonished at how many things I have to build completely by hand using classic tools, compasses and, scrolling saws and stuff. It's all, I don't have hardly any power tools here except for just a drill and a Dremel. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Jeez. Yeah.
It's bad, man.
Even a machine shop. We got to get you some access to someone with a machine shop out near Milwaukee or something.
Oh, I know. We got a maker space not that far from here, but it's just not really worth dealing with it. Dude, I used to have the craziest machine shop set up. I had everything there. I had the lathe. I had a little 3-axis CNC with a half-inch thick steel table that I built by hand from scratch. I had a whole bunch of stuff there. I had belt sanders and other stroh saws and all kinds of stuff, man. But now it's just like, that whole shop got shut down by the city. So
there are certain advantages to the reductionist method, of taking a raw material and then shaving it or cutting it down to the piece that you want, with reduction, versus 3D printing where you're doing addition. You're basically creating it by block by building it bottom up rather than
top
down.
In terms of skill set, you're going to learn a heck of a lot more doing it by hand. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
You're going to learn a lot about the tools and the materials in an intimate way, and you're going to have a wider variety of things to work with. Because if you learn how to build by hand first, which is definitely the way I'd recommend most people to go, something that I hope a craft that we don't lose unless 3D printers, come out where they can print pretty much anything available in a DIY or home purchase printer.
Well,
You're talking about
I have
materials you
some.
can't print.
I know some people that have a circuit printer. I can print circuit boards.
That is nice.
I also know some of these guys that they're working on. There's a company working on 3D printable metal.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, so they're actually going to be able to 3D print metals soon, which is really freaking cool. Yeah, 3D printing metals.
Yeah, right now we can 3D print metals with laser ablation and with laser fusing of those materials. So they're really, really fine granules, and we basically slam them with a fairly high power YAG laser a few thousand times per pass, and that will fuse the powder together, and we can print just about anything that way, including things like titanium, which would be incredibly hard to machine. The downside to that technology is the infrastructure required just to run one of those machines is quite tremendous, and of course their cost can be in the range of $1 million or so. So unfortunately, like a home version of metal printing just doesn't exist and probably won't for a long time, due to the fact that we have no real good way to put together the powders except for a high power industrial laser. But hey, people are very creative, and we could find out that maybe we can 3D print metals with a different method entirely, say like oscillating causing all the metals to go into some kind of ionized state where we disrupt their electron lattices so intensely using external electric or magnetic fields that we can basically just sort of allow them to meld together by using magnetic fields to push the now polarly charged atoms together. It'd be almost like an electrical compressive force, and we would be able to make just about any material we wanted that way, including layered metamaterials like Potkanoffs, micro thin gold layers.
Yeah, we can just print a YCBO disc, a
Right.
layered disc. That would be amazing.
If you have the control to basically take apart molecules by
Yeah.
destabilizing the bonds that hold them together, which are all pretty much electromagnetic in nature, then you would have the ability to produce almost anything you could dream of.
Well, speaking of dreaming and dreams, I had another interesting conversation recently with a friend who was talking about spin states in the brain and how quantum effects obviously are present in the brain because there's experiments with lithium isotopes, right? They fed a certain different lithium isotope to lab rats, and they noticed that it changed their behavior when they started, when they took over the regular present lithium in your brain with this one with a slightly heavier isotopes, which of course the slightly heavier isotope will have a different spin relaxation time, right? So that causes actual changes in behavioral effects within the brain. So there's obviously
That's interesting.
so there's and he was both of us were really surprised and sort of like why hasn't more medical research been done into different isotopes, just isolating different isotopes and feeding people just that isotope and seeing how or not people but lab rats rather just to see how the behavior changes brain.
That's a really valid point, Jeremy. And I should point out, people that are listening to this are probably wondering, why does it matter? Well, chemistry-wise, we wouldn't expect from the biochemistry approach that a different isotope of the same element would actually act any differently in the body if we just considered it an electrochemical process.
Unless there were quantum effects.
Right, exactly. That's why it's so significant, is because this indicates there's something going on beyond our conventional chemistry knowledge.
And the brain is very interesting. So another thing you pointed out, right, that I never really thought about before is that why do animals sleep? I mean, evolutionarily, it would be very disadvantageous to evolve, bodies that require sleep. So sleep must be absolutely necessary in order, because if it wasn't.
Oh, have you looked at dream studies and taken a look at some of the experiments and what happens during sleep and during REM?
Yes. So this is very interesting and relates back to this whole quantum nature of the brain and the quantum nature of consciousness in general. That maybe consciousness cannot exist because things that don't sleep die. Maybe that consciousness can't exist without sleep.
Not everything. Some species actually don't sleep. That's it,
Really?
but again, there's a lot of variations in the animal kingdom. Some things have such a slow metabolism that they can literally go for months without consuming really anything and be still conscious in a manner of speaking or aware of their environment and able to respond. So there's some really weird things going on there
Right.
where you, but I mean,
But certainly there's room for more exploration in this.
oh
You know,
yeah,
like, um,
there's an interesting study about a mouse which had electrodes injected into its brain so that we could watch its behavior and figure out what parts of the brain were lighting up during the course of it walking a maze and figuring its way through the maze. So we got a computer map of all these different electrical signals in this mouse's brain as it was completing the maze. And each time it did the maze, it got a little bit better and a little bit better. And we were able to map out those signal sequences. Well, when the mouse went to sleep, the scientists were shocked at the fact that they were measuring the exact same levels, amplitudes of the signal sequences as the mouse was apparently dreaming through its course in the maze and memorizing it in the dream state, playing that through until it got it right. And when it woke up, it instantly got it right. No more hesitation. Didn't stop around the turns. Just shot straight through because it knew exactly where to go. And when did that happen? During REM, during sleep.
yes. So what happens is that your brain's constantly bombarded by signals that don't mean anything. So you have this default operating mode kind of thing that's going on
Right.
that kind of throws out the junk data. There's so much junk data that is happening in your brain. Like, you know how you say you only use a certain percentage of your brain? That's because there's all this other stuff that's still going, and you're not using it because it's junk data. It doesn't mean it. It doesn't like mean anything. It's not like a coherent, like complete thought. So it just throws that
Right,
stuff
right. If
away.
you were intellectual about it, you could basically think your way past having to pay attention to these things, but just being
Right.
passive about it, you sort of end up processing a lot of the stuff in the background, and it really takes away from the more, I guess, human sentient processes that we're capable of
And
when we're
what's
in that animal
interesting
mode.
is that when you take psychedelics, it eliminates that default operating mode and allows all those other noise signals just to transmit and go through.
That's why people that have not tried them seriously need to.
So I thought
Because
that
I'm
was
telling you, man, it's hard to
interesting.
have a conversation with somebody who's not seen any of that stuff.
Right, but it explains like how like how that works in terms of the actual human brain function, which I thought was super fascinating. Because it's like it just basically when you're taking a psychedelic, it brings all those junk data and it just sends those signals through. It transmits them without throwing them away. But kind of like what you're doing in your dream state is reliving all that and going through it and sorting it all out, which is super interesting.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so you tried the light, and you know what that's about now. And we were
The
supposed to
light.
talk. You never did get me back about having that thing programmed. You know, we needed the programmer, and you happen to have some family that could maybe help with that. You know, the
All
the
right,
crazy light.
so back to Ed Fouché, which I started this thing off with. Ed Fouché had a buddy at the NSA who did all the research for Neuralink and Neurosync, and he had this Neurosync software, which was like it was developed back in the '90s, um, and I have copies of that Neuralink software.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
So it was the first it was one of the early brainwave studies that like discovered like alpha and beta and delta and all those other brain waves and kind of discovered some of that stuff, and also they discovered some things with binaural beats and in the splitting of the beat, breaking up of the frequencies and playing it through the different both ears stereo. So that was they developed some of that stuff, which I mean, a lot of that stuff's now out there. So it's not like super interesting or super insightful, or anything like super advanced that I have access to. It's like it's 20-year-old technology that's probably like what worked its way into like all this stuff. So who knows? It's not like like I don't know. We're gonna see. I'll get you a copy of the software and I'll send it to you so you can check it out. But I got it from Ed. Ed originally had it. We can check that out. I'm not even sure if it will run on a modern machine. You might need to get like a Windows 98 machine and run it or something.
I'm sure that can't be that hard to find.
But yeah, no, we can figure it out. But yeah, so he's got this light that does really cool things, and it makes you look like you close your eyes and it's like you see all these visualizations, and you can actually control the visualizations with these knobs that alter the frequency and pulsation and modulation of like the lights and stuff, it was super cool. And we got to make these things and start selling them, because people would buy those, like those things would sell like those things are awesome, dude. Everyone should have one, and everyone would buy one. I know it once they tried it. If you brought that thing on Joe Rogan and showed Joe Rogan, he'd be like, dude, you know what I mean?
Dude,
It'd be all
he's gonna lose his freaking mind
oh,
on
oh
camera
God, he
on
would.
that thing, and
He'd
he'll
be
love
like,
every second about it.
yeah, because it's like it gives you like all the visualizations of like you're on like tripping your ass off, and it's like you just open your eyes and it's like, whoa, it's gone.
Exactly. So the reason I brought that up is because I was looking at this earlier today and considering adding some interesting functionality in terms of an extra device. So far we've tested TDCS and CMS. We've sent electrical pulses in DC currents and in pulse form through the skull and through various parts of the body for entrainment in synchronous with this light. We've also tested vibratory sensory inputs from a bass pack, which is like a subwoofer without the voice coil attached to a chair, so you can get some really low frequency vibrations that you can feel in the sound that you couldn't normally hear. So that was hooked up and helped brainwave entrain. But I was thinking there's one more step that we haven't gone to, and that's how do you take this experience, which is not only visually and sensory powerful, auditorily powerful, and physically powerful, but how do you take this experience and take it to that next level where it becomes spiritually powerful? So Mr. What is it, Persinger, I believe. Let's take a look.
Persinger.
Yeah, let's see, God Helmet. Who was this guy? Michael Persinger, the God Helmet. Okay, so Michael Persinger came up with this thing that had a couple of electromagnetic solenoids positioned around the outside of this big old motorcycle helmet-looking thing, and sort of makeshift. So what he would do is he would hook up EEG probes to the participants' head, and he would measure their brain state and allow them to relax in this chair inside this closed-off room that's all dark and sound isolated. And so the participant would be in this room alone, and just with a couple of wires going out, pretty much empty room. They knew they were alone in there. And their participant would, when they would get it to a relaxed state, Persinger would then administer some electromagnetic fields through these solenoids that he fed with an audio amplifier that were phased with each other to form rotation on opposite sides of the skull, positioned about the temporal lobes. And almost 100% of test participants reported various interesting spiritual phenomena, like being very certain that there was a presence in the room with them, physically seeing things moving around in the darkness. Some people said they seen or experienced the feeling of God manifested right there, hence the name the God Helmet, and all nature of other strange spiritual phenomena. Some people thought that there was a poltergeist. They got afraid. You know, they were showing indications of skin conductivity increased and
Yeah, it sounds
sweating.
like
You know,
Montauk
a
or Skinwalker, right?
right, dude. It's really interesting stuff because this is a totally different form of entrainment, and it entirely is magnetic. There's no other stimulation going on to the body other than these rotating magnetic fields being pumped with solid state output from a multi-channel audio amplifier. And so the readily available technology, being that it's all really simple stuff, is something that I'm thinking, if we already have all these other things that the light can do in conjunction with other technologies, this is the part where we can really push it to the next level if we can integrate this.
Yeah. Oh my
Right?
word. If you could,
That's what I'm saying,
if you
dude.
could like
I'm trying to make
figure
a
out,
whole life machine that does
imagine
literally
that.
every sense at once.
That would be like, instead of going to church, you just turn this machine on and you can experience God directly.
5 minutes on this
Okay.
thing and you've seen the most phenomenal things you'll ever see in your entire life, and then you
Yeah.
have to walk away.
Like,
You
all right,
have to
I gotta
walk
go.
away.
I gotta walk away. Is this your
Like, I
brain?
can feel my brain melting. I just burned up all my serotonin and my dopamine reserves are being taxed.
This is your brain.
What am I going to... Yeah.
This is your brain on God.
Oh, man. Okay. Glad I wasn't... I just finished sipping my drink on that one, or it would have came out my nose. I literally didn't see that corner coming.
It's literally the the name of this Wired article I have up on screen right now.
Oh, man. That's too good.
This is awesome.
So that's coming up in the future. As for the lab right now, I've been playing around with a new ionizer design, which is very promising. It's similar to a dielectric barrier discharge machine, and it's similar to an ozone generator, but it's different in both of those things in a fundamental way. So what it does is it takes a high voltage, high frequency AC electric field, and it transmits it over a flat plate radiator outwards through a piece of dielectric, and that field hits a piece of very, very thin filament wire. It doesn't run hot. It's just a piece of emitter wire made of tungsten, extremely thin. And so when the electric field hits that charged wire in the opposite polarity, so if it goes negative and the wire is charged positive, what it'll do is increase the potential of the physical area around that wire, increasing its likelihood to create positive ions. And so those ions will fly out and hit the surface of the dielectric, and then the opposite side of the phase, the plate becomes positive, and it throws the ions off the surface of the plate, ejecting them into the atmosphere on the outside. So the reason why this is kind of...
Can you bring up a picture of this on screen, maybe?
Can you do a screen? I can't yet because I've built 5 versions so far, and number 6 is curing right now. I have only taken just 2 pictures of this thing, but I don't want to share the build details yet because it's sort of it's crude, and it's not so much that it's crude, and replicating it like this is going to cause more problems than success.
Yeah.
So before I waste people's time having them try to make this inferior device, we'll just get the final version working.
And something good,
yeah, I'm doing a whole tutorial video on how to build it anyways because I thought it was significant. But this is what it
once again, I'm
offers.
talking with Jeremiah. He's joined the Technicians YouTube channel. You guys can check out. Just type in "Join the Technicians," and you'll be able to find his channel.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited about the new channel. There's nothing up there yet, but this is one of the videos that's going to go up on the new channel. So that's something that's coming. I just got the new exotic propulsion.
Yeah, I can't wait to get everything set up over here on my end too with the podcast. I'm kind of like I'm just upgraded my just general setup and stuff. But I ordered a microphone. The microphone didn't get here. Apparently, Guitar Center is sold out of condenser microphones. They have no condenser microphones.
How is that even possible?
Because the pandemic, a lot of people are hosting business meetings. Everything's being done from home, and there's a lot of people starting podcasts.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
There's a record number of people starting podcasts right now because they've seen the success of the podcast industry, and they're like, all right, I'm home now. I lost my job, and
man,
what do I
should
do?
be doing podcasts.
So it's all right. Well, it's one thing if you got something to talk about and you got some interesting connections and guests and stuff. But even I've been in this field 15 years, and it's hard me getting guests, and getting people on to talk to me sometimes.
Well, think about it, man. You're broadcasting your show at friggin' 4 a.m. I mean, what are you doing? How are you going to get people on this show? I have no idea why I'm up, except for I'm working on this tech.
And we got all the people.
The reason I'm away.
Everyone has all the Europeans, and we got some Australians probably in there. Up real late. So it's, that's what we get is we get the other side of the planet when we do these 5 a.m. broadcasts. But I don't always broadcast in 5 a.m. A lot of times I'll try to do these afternoon.
Well, you get these closer to like 10 at night, and that's what you're gonna have more than 70 people watching. But
yeah, but this is still cool, man. We get all the.
It is cool, man.
A lot of people catch this on the replay. We'll get thousands catching it on the replay, so it's all good. But so back to what you were saying before I interrupted you to
that's fine.
Boost your channel.
It's good stuff, man. Yeah, it's good stuff. The reason I'm bringing up this ionizer is if you think about a classic ion lifter, the triangular, easy, hook it up to your old CRT TV and get shocked kind of lifter. Anyways, those things are really heavy, and we've talked about on your channel before my pursuits in building a VTOL self-contained lifter that does not use conventional lifter technology. I'm looking to a different approach, and the reason why is I want to make a thruster that is significantly more compact and is scalably compact, which means you're not relying on the atmospheric conditions and the conductivity of the air at your altitude or at your dew point or humidity or anything like that in order to reliably produce ionization and create a force. And right now, if you have an ionization wire, or also called a corona wire, which is just a thin piece of non-insulated conductor that is suspended above the skirt, right? That's going to throw out some ions, and those ions are going to accelerate quickly away from its field and kind of be thrown all over the place. And some of them will inevitably hit the skirt and create upwards force, but you're going to waste most of them, and they're going to be highly inefficient because they're accelerating at the same potential that they were generated at. And so that's a problem. So if you could just decrease the potential between these 2 points in space and grab onto these ions with the electric fields, if, say, instead of 70,000 volts to create ionization, you could do it at 5,000 volts, the number of ions you can get in that same volume of space between the control grid, which is the entry point of the thruster, and the collector, which is the exit point of the thruster, and ions filling the space between the control grid and the collector, if you can get more ions in there, you can get more thrust. So now imagine taking something very small, the size of a hockey puck, having your collector and your control grid in that space and injecting a highly ionized gas into that volume of space. Well, now you've got a little hockey puck sized thruster open on both sides that can basically lift 10 pounds. Why? Because of the amount of air that it can actually process due to the fact that it doesn't rely on ionization threshold for corona, but you can inject as much ionized air into that space as you want and accelerate it with those grids. So the point is this new ionization panel that I'm working on basically allows me to make a ionized air stream, and I no longer have to rely on high voltages to ionize the air with thin wires, which means that I can now get 10 times more thrust potentially out of these same thrusters and, work towards something more like Iron Man technology, where it's highly compact and scalable, and you can just simply use a ionizable gas pumped down a tube instead of having these high voltages present.
Sweet.
So something very exciting, man, and it has a lot of potential for lifting very large masses due to the fact that you can produce as much as you want. It's pretty energy efficient, too. It actually only uses exactly as much energy as required to produce the ions. All the extra energy that's not turned into an ion gets returned back to the circuit. So that's something kind of interesting.
Yes, and I think that relates back to this near field, far field stuff, right?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
So this is the theoretical stuff behind how this all works with antennas and electromagnetics. Very key stuff. You know what? I was talking to this guy from this new guy I met. I won't say where he's from yet because I don't want to talk too much about it. But he repeated the same stuff back to me, dude. But he called it. You know what he called it? I never heard this before. Evanescence fields.
Wow, that's weird.
I was like, evanescent? Like, not evanescent. Evanescent, not evanescence. Sorry, it's evanescent field. And I'd never heard it called that before. And he's like, yeah, it's called the evanescent field. And like, here
How is he using that? Yeah, how is he using that term? Let's take a look at this.
And it's the same exact stuff. It's basically describing the same exact stuff, the pointing vector, the average pointing vector of the electromagnetic wave and how it, where it fades to, whether it fades to a close point or if it fades at a distance, if it goes to a distance, which is transmitting antennas. You know what I mean?
That's an interesting use of terminology that I've also never seen. It pretty much describes exactly how that little gravitator panel works.
This is very interesting. It goes to Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory, which I think is key to the whole the theoretics of what we're trying to do, right? It's called Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory, right? And this is relation to when when Feynman graduated, I think with his undergraduate degree, or was it when he graduated graduate school? But anyways. Basically, his dad asked him like, where does the photon come from? When an atom just emits a photon, where does the photon come from? What is the photon? Where does it come from? And
that's a damn good question, and I would also like to see the real answer for that.
Right, and that got him thinking, well, what is this whole thing? And I think that's what led to this Feynman absorber theory with photons and what photons are and what. So. Anyways, I've talking to some other theoreticians who kind of that other theoretician. I introduced you to him, and he kind of independently derived a lot of that stuff that Todd Desiato and Hal Puthoff kind of came up with. That kind of. So
yeah, he's on fire with that stuff. He's got a lot of interesting ideas.
Super interesting, and it relates. It's super interesting how Todd Desiato is this young graduate student. kind of had all these ideas at the same time. He met Hal Puthoff, who was this, had been writing papers for 20 years at that point. And then all of a sudden Hal wrote that paper on the polarizable vacuum, PV theory of general relativity, which changed a lot of stuff on, like the warp drive schematic stuff. But I think like it's almost like he almost got that from, like he got I think he was influenced at least in part by Todd's work. You know what I mean? Because Todd, it was right around the same time. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's strange how different people come to the same kind of theories. Every single time I think I come up with something really brilliant and foundational, I always find sometime later, and I'm getting better at finding it sooner now.
Right.
That it's been out there, and it's sort of like once I come up with a theory, I try to name that theory, and what my brain comes up with as the natural name for that theory ends up being very similar or containing the key words of other theories. So I find it interesting. It seems like when you start to study certain subjects, if you are studied enough, you're going to naturally come to the same types of conclusions. Exactly, because you're going to see these gaps. These gaps are blaringly obvious if you've been in the field long enough, and it's sort of like understanding that if you have, say, Fluke is a really good multimeter company, for example, and Fluke makes a multimeter, the Series 23, which is a nice little handheld unit. Does basically everything, 300 milliamps, 10 amps, and does AC and DC measurements and something. If you try to use that meter in the AC function to try to measure a high-frequency signal, it's going to go all over the frickin' place and give you a reading that's about 10 times to 50 times lower than it should be for frequencies that operate in switch-mode power supplies. It's just not going to measure it. But you wouldn't know that unless you had, actually seen what that signal looked like. Now, if you're just a repair tech and that's the only tool you've ever used, you're just going to think that, on the high voltage rail of a power supply, when you're checking that thing and it's operating and switching, that, it's only 15 volts because that's what your meter says. The point is that some of these things, the overlaps become obvious if you do it for long enough because you begin to see, well, some of these more conventionally accepted theories, general relativity, for example, it works for the most part, but when you try to use it here, it really doesn't work. And it is one of those strange phenomena that I think that we're at a point in 2020 here with the connectivity of everybody right now, especially now with COVID going on and the fact that everybody is becoming incredibly good at connecting over distances now by necessity, which includes even people that had no interest in using computers or using smartphones or any other type of connected devices. Now they're having to learn how to use those things. So the world really is going to get connected as a result of this whole thing. And there's never been a better opportunity to link up with other people doing this stuff, doing the research, doing the experiments, presenting new theories, trying to understand it. And we're going to find that the new theories are popping out every month.
The future of academia is so uncertain right now with like this whole
is it ever?
COVID and
They're
everything.
either got to get on the train or get off the road.
Yeah, it's jump on board, and there's no holding back now because everything's changing at a very fast
you think
pace.
MIT is going to go underwater? Heck no, man. MIT is going to be testing all this stuff right along with the rest of us. Now, as far as other universities, maybe not so. They probably will not do so well.
There's lots of other, University of Rochester is already doing a ton of work on all this optical and stuff. So
right, exactly.
So there's plenty of other universities besides the top ones. If they don't want like Harvard, they're so stuck up, yet they're like head of their astronomy department's one of the biggest UFO guys out there, Avi Loeb.
Right. Well, a smart university isn't going to ignore a new discovery just because it disagrees with the conventional viewpoints on physics. And an archaic university is going to try to hold on to those old views because all their professors are tenured and they don't want to consider something that's totally brand new and maybe be wrong their entire life about something and have to face that. But some places will do well and not all places will, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm glad to be there on what some would say the pseudo-front edge of at least being able to access this stuff and knowing what some of the search terms are in order to be able to find it.
So, all right. So it's hard to find this stuff. Even when I search for it, I can't find it. So here's one thing to go look for: Todd Desiato, Engineering Model of Gravity, and go to this channel called Warp Drive Tech. It's the second link right here, and subscribe to Warp Drive Tech right here. This is Todd's channel, and watch. He's only got 3 videos here. Watch his 3 videos there. That should give you a really good introduction for the theoretical physicists out there, you can say this is the stuff that you want to send to your physics professor or your physics buddy to go and analyze to get if you want to get them interested and on board with this stuff. This is what I would send them probably first. Interesting stuff about the photon, though, in Todd's model. The way that Todd looks at the photon is that he says it's just like an LC circuit. And with capacitor, I think he said like a capacitor on each end. And the capacitor is the actual, it is the atoms. Atoms are like capacitors. And that's very interesting because it's similar to Frank Synardzik's whole way of looking at the atom, and what he discovered from looking at the experiments because he did some of the NASA replications of the Podkletnov experiment and some of the other stuff with Whit Brantley out at NASA's Advanced Research Laboratories doing some of the investigations into this stuff. So he's got a paper out there where it basically treats at an atom like a capacitor, and he says that there's not this transmission unless there's an impedance match in the system, and then the transmission goes through and that's why this electron can jump down from this orbital to a lower orbital level and emit a photon, and that's where the photon comes from physically. It comes from the collapse of these fields and how and the way of modeling this whole thing like these capacitors. Right. So
right. Well, you could consider a photon basically just the positional information of an electron, and if it suddenly moves from one general position where it's balanced through a region where it's not balanced into another region where it is balanced, there's going to be that little transition where its unbalanced electric field is radiated outwards, and it's only going to be during the time where it's moving between one stable state and another. And so during that transition, it happens very fast, and it's a very powerful electric field because it's still 1 coulomb of charge, just like each individual proton in the nucleus. So that field uncoupled is going to radiate out in all directions at velocity c. So it's an interesting little phenomena. But yeah, photons being both a lateral motion and transmitting the electric field creates that phenomena that we see of the 90 degrees coupled magnetic and electric fields.
So there's an underlying mechanism which causes a coupling of the electromagnetic potential with the complex phase of a charged particle's wave function. And that's called this Aharonov-Bohm effect, the Bohm effect. I can't say the first guy's name, Yakir Aharonov. But I'll post this in the
I'm not even going to try.
In the live stream chat. Yeah, no, I can't remember it for the life of me. I just like David Bohm. The guy.
That's okay. Here's a link. Everybody's
yeah, here's a link.
Good
Go
enough.
Check it out. So, in any case, this is potentials and fields. This global action versus local forces. This is all connected with this he demonstrates it with this magnetic solenoid effect. Talks about Dirac strings and monopoles. This is another piece of the puzzle. I know, and I'm just saying that it definitely connects. I haven't dug into it all completely yet, but I want to get back into this other idea of the photon as an electron, as an electron carrier, right? It just carries information
right,
from
it's
the
electron momentum carrier, exactly. And all this stuff is very, very well understood if you consider the Maxwellian approach. So
but that momentum, the interesting thing about the photon momentum, and back to that whole scalar wave thing, and the process of if you have two photons that destructively interfere,
exactly, yeah,
what happens to the momentum? And that is revealing that the photon is the carrier of the graviton. The photon is the carrier of gravitational information, and that gravity is mediated by the photon somehow. And in all these experiments that we're doing, we see where we get positive results, because there are some experiments where we get results. We get forces which are anomalous. We can't describe with classical and standard model physics. This is fascinating because it shows us that light is the carrier of the graviton, and it carries this information through this sort of like this phasing. at this.
Yeah, I mean, giving it a name like graviton, I think, could be misleading. So I guess I'd try to stay away from that
Right.
kind of naming convention.
Because
But
there's no such thing as gravity.
it's
It's
a
an
wave. It's a
illusionary
wave
force.
function.
It's a momentum carrier in the wave function. Yes. It's
And so there's, I guess we'd have to sort of define photon too. This is one of the things I guess there's nobody really better that I know qualified to talk about it than probably you. But trying to just define what a photon is, do we want to put some kind of limiting parameters, parentheses around the outside, saying a photon is this type of electromagnetic radiation? It is the information about the positional data from an electron doing a transit. But do we want to go so far as to say if that same type of electric signal is produced, say, by a proton being pulled away from a position, which would produce the exact same type of electric field change as an electron moving towards a position, do we still call that a photon? And does it have maybe different properties as a result of that? Because really it shouldn't. It's just the polarization of space, right? But space is saturable. This is one of the things that Heaviside killed. Okay, and we got to talk about that.
yes.
Heaviside murdered Maxwell's equations. He detested the idea of vector potentials. And that's because they were complicated, and it was not very engineerable for people to try to calculate out, what is the direction of this field at this exact point, and what is this amplitude. And you can make a basically infinite number of points down to the Planck scale of these vector potentials if you want to. But the point being, he hated that system, and Maxwell had many different figures to describe the various properties of space and time dealing with electromagnetic fields, and Heaviside basically whittled these equations down to 4 very simple equations that could be used by, right. And the whole purpose was, and I just heard another interview earlier today, great one, talking about this same thing. His goal was to try to give the power grid, the newly developing power grid that was being implemented at that time, give these engineers a way to actually build that system and make it work that they could understand. And he did that. He did exactly that, and it got us tremendously farther forward, because now all of a sudden Maxwell's incredibly complicated mathematics were discernible to the common man. Well, the common engineer, anyways. But the problem with that is we kept it, and we used it in place of Maxwell's stuff, and it means that we can no longer engineer space-time. Now we can just deal with electromagnetic fields and balanced systems and closed loops, and that's it. There's nothing else. If you only study the Heaviside stuff, the point being, momentum and inertia are carried by this medium. Okay, so if you have 2 magnets facing each other and they're attracting to each other, they're not actually attracting to each other. These 2 magnets are physically separated by space, and one physical body of mass containing electron spins that are aligned is not connecting directly with that other physical body of mass. They're actually connecting with the space around them, and they're polarizing that space. And so the rotation of these electron spins is transferred at the speed of light through the physical volume of space between these 2 magnets. And when the second magnet gets the field from the first one, it interacts with that field around itself, now being carried by space. So we have to recognize the existence of a medium that carries these waves, and that's the all-important part that we cannot deny, is that all interactions that take place in our universe, they take place with space. They don't take place with these direct sort of one-to-one interactions.
Right.
So that fact allows us to engineer the amount of information in space, because here's the other catch. If you've heard of the idea of magnetic saturation, if you continue to increase the intensity of a magnetic field around, say, a piece of iron, the iron will continuously produce a greater and greater magnetic field up to a certain point. At one point, it becomes saturated, and every single little region inside the iron is aligned to that magnetic flux that's passing through it, and there are no longer any more regions to align or any farther that they can turn to align. So at that point, it's saturated, and now this magnetic field is going to increase only as a result of the current flowing through the coil around the iron. Well, space has a similar property. If you put enough electromagnetic energy into it, it becomes more and more difficult to put more energy into it. So you get these really high energy levels where what space does in order to compensate for the presence of these very high energy electromagnetic waves traveling through it is time slows down, because there's a mass equivalent of this electromagnetic energy traveling through space. So where does the energy from 2 canceling photons go in the region of space where they're canceling and there's no vector potentials of electric or magnetic fields, because technically they're both pointing in the opposite directions and they cancel out? Well, there's still this other thing called a scalar potential, and this is where Maxwell shines. because the scalar potential allows us to still say there's energy in this space, even though the electric and magnetic fields cancel out, there's still this scalar potential of that photon position that creates a change in the parameters of that volume of space, and time actually flows slower there while these two photons are crossing that region. And this comes right back down to squeezed light and all those other things,
Right.
where you're talking about changing the way that light interacts with itself and other mediums by creating these interesting coherent states. And it's all but completely ignored by mainstream physics, because probably it's complicated for the same reason that people prefer Heaviside in general over Maxwell, because who the heck can really understand Maxwell?
Yeah. But
I can't certainly read it and comprehend all this stuff. I can, drift across it and try to derive pieces that I can use.
The idea is that also, like our friend there said, the photon noise is like shot noise. That there's this region of space that's just everywhere. The kind of thing we think of as space is this thing everywhere. This transmission of photons across this. It's infinite number of photons just transmitting information. It's all these atoms which are interacting as little capacitors, which are transmitting information at different frequencies all over, all the time. And there's a bunch of noise in that, and the signal gets lost in the noise. I think that he's saying that the noise is actually responsible for gravity, because the Earth's underneath us. It has more mass there, so it's creating more noise in the system. So that's creating more gravity. That's kind of like where gravity is, and you can resolve that by eliminating the noise, and you can eliminate shot noise. You can eliminate shot noise by using these discrete particle nature, like a grid overlay, in the same way that you could use these kind of evanescent fields to resolve the gravitational waves or shot noise. If photon noise is gravity, you could resolve that.
Well, if you called gravity, say, just noise, it's electromagnetic noise.
Yeah.
And this explains the acceleration towards this massive body. Let's take a look at what's actually going on. So we have this thing that's called mass, and you can very much argue that mass is an electric potential phenomena, and also a result of a motion of electric fields. Yep. Which, as we've now studied, most of the mass of a proton does not actually come from the particles themselves, these subatomic particles that make up the proton, but they come from the motion of these subatomic particles linked to each other.
Yes, so it's exactly. It's the retaining fields, because the strongest force in the universe is not like gravity. It's not electromagnetism. It's what holds atoms together, and that binding force that binds these nuclei together inside of atoms is what is kind of responsible for that shaking.
Well, right. Not only just that force being present, but also the fact that these individual forces, they're moving. They have a physical dimension, albeit very, very small, but that physical dimension and its orientation is constantly changing. You have these things that are moving around. So that creates a polarization of the space around it as necessitated. So let's take a look at mass as an electric phenomena, and consider that the gravity of the planet is produced by the electric charge and the fact that it's radiating out through the volume of space from every proton, electron, and even the magnetic moment of the neutron, which still has its own magnetic field, which is just like an electric charge viewed from a different angle. So it has this motional electric field that moves around it so fast that we can't really tell where it is at any given point, but we know that it has one because it has this flux that moves. Anyways. So all these particles, they have these electric fields, and the electric fields could theoretically explain their mass, and that can be argued all day long, I'm sure. But let's just take a look at if this electric energy, the charge and positional information from every charged particle, is effectively a photon, and a photon present in a physical volume of space where photons cancel, they create a relativistic or virtual mass in that region of space, which has those same properties of physically interacting with matter. Okay, there we have basically a gravitational phenomena. Then gravity could just be all of these independent electric fields from all of the electric potentials of every single thing on this planet, basically intersecting, canceling. And this is how gravity can operate at some said distance, and you get an interaction in that local volume of space with an object of the mass of whatever it is at a distance. Because otherwise, how are these fields actually coupling? How is gravity transmitted? What form does it take? And it's obviously carried through the medium of space, just like the electromagnetic waves. So we know that when something reacts gravitationally, it's not reacting with the body that produced the gravity directly. It's reacting with the volume of space that carried that gravity information, whatever form it's in, to that volume of space, so you can have a local interaction, right? Because then when my ball drops, my ball is not responding to every single atom in the planet simultaneously. It's responding to the fields of all those things at the point where the ball is at after they've already traveled whatever distance they have to travel to get there. So
Yep.
that could explain, how this interaction is taking place in that local field and what exactly it's made of. And I would say that you could call it space-time curl, or you could refer to Maxwell's equations again and actually explain it electromagnetically by showing that the properties of space in that region have changed. And there's a directionality to it.
And the interesting thing of the math works out that it's based on the surfaces, and it's all the interactions take place at the surfaces, which is super interesting because that means if you change the surface and you change that interaction, then you can basically eliminate inertia, or what we know of as inertia.
It is an interesting idea.
It is, yes. That's the idea of 2020, and very fascinating stuff, man. Awesome way to start my morning. And then I gotta go and
awesome way to end my day.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for. I gotta get going. Get ready to hear for work now, and go and do some tile. So not as fun as the tilings, the microscopic metamaterial tilings we'll be building for the craft of the future in a couple of years, hopefully. But yeah, man.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to donate a 3D printer for the Wisconsin lab, hey, let us know.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, anyone? I've already gotten some helpful Bitcoin through the Hover Brothers site, so that link does work. It's active, and you definitely help in getting the gears rolling on all this stuff. So looking forward to releasing more information in the future, and keeping on the science, and mixing science and UFOs, because they deserve to be taken together. They deserve to be given a place together, on the table. Yeah, we're reaching science fiction's becoming science reality. I believe it will within our lifetimes. And
for sure, dude. If our little group is already getting results, there's no way that other people aren't out there doing it too.
Yes, it's only a matter of time. No, we're almost there, man. Just keep the faith, and thanks you all. Thanks for the $1 we made in the chat revenue. Not trying to. You guys are cool. You guys are cool. We got plenty disclosures coming with or without. We got a lot of you have already contributed, and right on. We're doing this, and we're gonna set up a convention. So anyways, just remember the 15th. I think we're gonna do 15th Sunday morning, unless that's subject to change. But that's when I want to do the Ed Fouché show. And then the 3rd, maybe catch me on Tim Pool podcast. Hopefully I'll be talking about some disclosure and some of this stuff and our research with gravity. So as always, signing out.
Take it easy, folks.
Later. Thanks, Jay Roach. You're the man.
Heck yeah, man.
UFO technology.